if you want to do something, set your target. You set your target, but don't set a time to your target that I need to do this by 2025 or 2023 or what have you. You have a target and just go after it. Just go
Mm-hmm.
after it like it's food. Like without it, you will not survive, and it will come to you.
Hello, people. Welcome to the community of the Growth Mindset podcast. Guys, if you are a first time listener, don't forget to subscribe on whichever platform you're listening from so that you don't miss on more interesting episodes coming up in following weeks. And for our daily listeners, here we are again with a new episode where we will interview another interesting personality from a unique industry and understand how they were able to accomplish this great level of success. Remember, this is a podcast where we learn easy, practical methods and tips that we can implement in our daily lives from the very best and the most successful people known today. Because as we all know, success leaves clues. And we, the people having the growth mindset, will use these clues to create a better, more fulfilling, and a successful life. So, let the growth begin. Saad, thank you so much for taking your time out and joining us on the Growth Mindset podcast. It is a pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you very much, Rashad. Appreciate it. I really like what you're doing, and I think, the whole idea of growth is already there in your title. So I hope you grow, more and more and, reach out to people. And as you rightly said, right, this is about reaching out to the audience who wants to, get, a leaf out of maybe someone's life, or tape and advice, some sort of, inspiration somewhere. And I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. That's great. And that's one of the reasons, Saad, right? Because I've been following your work, I've been seeing, and which is astonishing and amazing, the kind of work that you're doing. You're doing a lot of things, you're juggling between a lot of things, which is why I was like, okay, no, let's talk to Saad, let's get his story out because you definitely have some good story. Now, for people who might not have heard about you from, let's say, other parts of the countries or other states, would you like to tell something about yourself so that people can get an understanding what Saad is all about?
I think, if you would have asked me this question about 3 years ago, I would have just simply said that I'm a film director. I'm a filmmaker who also, runs an improv comedy show. But now I'm donning quite a few hats other than the fact that I'm a writer,
True.
director, as well as, an improv host and improv comedian. I also have a full-fledged, film and media production company, and which is called First Action, and, that is, a company which is now a part of a bigger media conglomerate in Bombay, which is called Rainshine Entertainment. And, yes, so, I got into my entrepreneurial journey about 2 years ago, so I'm also an entrepreneur now. But yeah, I think offline when I was speaking to you, I said, right, it's just I have just kept going, and I've, really not, obviously I wanted to, be in the media industry, and, that ambition was always there, but I never really expected or never really thought that I'm going to get, this far. So yeah, I believe in luck and destiny. So yeah, that's who I am.
Interesting. How did all this story begin in the first place, Saad? You were born and brought up in Bangalore, right? Can you
Yes.
share your story as to what was your education like and how did you start your professional career first?
So I've always been a very curious person. I've always been very curious, and I've always been very ambitious from a very early age. And, I was in school, and I didn't have a very good experience in school. I wanted to do a lot, but, there were a lot of, seniors and, peers who, for some reason didn't take a liking to me. So I was always really pushed to not do things, whether it was, getting a part in a play. I really wanted to be on stage, and even whenever I was on stage, I knew I could play Shylock in Merchant of Venice, but, in a better manner than what the other kid was doing in the 10th grade. But then someone else would get the role, and I would just be
Yeah.
given a smaller role. So, that was, one of the first, incidents was that, in my school time, I wanted to really, really, get out there, but then that was sort of pulled back. So then when I got into my, 11th standard, first PUC was what we call it, I absolutely sort of broke away, and, I absolutely came out of my, so to speak, shell. I mean, I was a pretty good grade A student, So I
Okay.
was, memory was on my side. So I was a pretty good student. And when I came into the first PUC, I was like, Merko, I want to get into arts. I want to, do this. So I completely became a different human being. Actually, it was quite crazy. I completely changed from this guy who was getting a first, second, third rank to a guy who ended up in first PUC getting like 41%. Because in the entire first PUC, I was only into extracurricular activities. So that's where it really began. And by the time I was in second PUC, I used to love watching plays. So without any real
Mm.
training, I just set out to direct and write plays. And I obviously I used to read a lot, but I never really got formal training at that point. So started directing very early. I started directing at the age of 16 actually, without
Wow.
really knowing about the craft too much. Which I don't, which I'm not, I don't regret that because I think when you just take a deep dive into a sea, into ocean, you just without knowing how to swim, chances are that you might not survive, but sometimes you just do. And luckily
True.
for me, I did survive. But once I started, I always was someone with a lot of energy and with passion. So I would try to convince and I would literally be like that small wolf on Wall Street, just trying to go and sell to whoever I could. And I was able to do that. So I started going and meeting brands and companies and all of that. And soon my place started becoming commercial. Instead of just showing to about 100 people in an auditorium, I started doing plays in Chowdaya Hall, which had 1,000-seater auditoriums. And this was when I was 19, 20.
Wow.
So yeah, and while I also ended up, my parents were very keen that I shouldn't be that guy with that, typical kurta and chola and, theater wala look. So
Yeah.
they're very keen that I shouldn't be in that space. So that's when I also got into engineering, and I did my engineering. I graduated as well with a first class distinction. I'm a mechanical engineer. Yeah, so I did my 4 years of mechanical engineering. I ended up directing about 12 plays in those 4 years. And out of those 12 plays, I wrote about 9 plays. And while I was doing these plays, I also got a lot of, I would say, internal popularity in Bangalore because at that point, most theater people were seniors, in their 40s and 50s. And everyone was like, who's this brash, arrogant 20-year-old who's putting up all these productions and plays in Bangalore? And I was, when you start sort of taste a little bit of fame at a young age, it kind of gets to your head. I mean, most kids it doesn't, at least these days, but for me, it did get to my head. And I do regret it because I was a very different person back then. And we all change, we all evolve. If you don't evolve, then it's a problem. You should
True.
evolve. A lot of people say that, oh my God, I hate change. It's hampering my, mindset, but it's not. I mean, it's a great thing to evolve. So for me at that point, I was just, I used to give really these weird brash interviews in the press. When anyone used to tell me that why is this 20, 21-year-old doing all these massive productions? But I was just lucky. I had the audience on my side. I had a
Hmm.
lot of comedy in my plays and a lot of romance in my plays. So the younger audiences really sort of, looked up to that. They connected with it at that point. And soon after that, I finished my engineering. And after I finished my engineering, I had that very Rang De Basanti Amir Khan moment where I couldn't get myself to get out of college because I loved my 4 years of engineering so much at Ramaya that I didn't want to leave. I kept, at least for 6 months after I graduated, I kept going back to Ramaya to do theater workshops because I had that little bit of popularity. They kept calling me for different things and I
Hmm.
didn't. I think after almost 6 months, and that's when I had already applied to go to the US to do my master's. And when I got in, that's when it hit me that, oh my God, my life has changed now. It's going to change. It's going to change drastically. And it did, because that's when I went abroad. And yeah, that is obviously the next part of the story. But in the beginning, it was my start, or rather my first few steps into the media industry was primarily about this curious guy who was very ambitious and very passionate and who just wanted to do stuff with and would really excel, or rather would be extremely excited when someone would tell him it's not possible.
Interesting. And you've touched upon a few important points as well, because listeners basically are going to be listening to us. That a lot of them are going to be students as well. Now, how do you manage in that specific point of time? You said you were a good student, and then when you walked into PUC first and second PUC, your grades dropped. So how was your parents' response to those to
Oh,
your
they were very dramatic. They were very dramatic, like any other Bollywood parents. They were extremely dramatic. I mean, there was a time where I walked in once in the night, from very late from rehearsal, at around 12:30 in the night, and I had the house key, and I opened the door, and it was all dark, and I turned after closing the door, And I panicked because I see these silhouettes of two figures sitting in a dark room. And that was my parents sitting in the dark room, and I panicked and I turned the light on, and they were just sitting morose, like as if it's the end of the world. And I was like, at least you should have. Why you? What dramatic effect is this by sitting in the dark? You could have kept the lights on. And then my dad just sort of puts his head down and stands up, and I think that he's going to give me this huge Parikshit Sani lecture from Munna Bhai, but then he doesn't. He just walks away. And my mom is sitting there, and she looks up to me very, very, in a typical slow motion manner, And then she sort of looks at me and she says, we're just scared and worried that one day our son will not just come home so late, but our son will come home drunk so late. And I was like, wow, what a dialogue at 12:30.
Did you write
So
it down out of time?
I mean, yeah, I didn't. I have never used it. I always just. I mean, I don't even joke about it because it's not that I'm making this up. This really happened, right? And the next day at breakfast, everything was back to normal. But my mom was just berating me for coming late and what is this rehearsals? What do you want to do? You want to end up being a theater guy? What is wrong with you? You have something else to do with your life, etc., etc. But I always had at that point a very sort of a naughty relationship with my parents where I would keep on telling them that, I'll do it. But then I would do what I wanted to do. But the moment I started getting more popularity and I would be in the press and stuff like that, my parents would proudly show it to relatives and, send the servants to get the newspaper whenever I would be in the newspaper. And, so they obviously were supportive. But it's a parent thing, right? They always will be worried if the son or the daughter decides to follow an artistic or a performing arts path. They're always going to be worried for some reason. But obviously now the things have changed. And maybe not. It's still probably relevant in some places. But yeah, my parents were they were apprehensive. But I think for all the young people, students who are listening, if your parents are apprehensive and they are putting roadblocks in front of you, I think it's amazing. You should cherish it. The only reason is because now you have, other than the world, you have more people to prove wrong. And the only way you can prove them wrong is by working your ass off, working so hard, working with knowing that you have to sacrifice a lot so that you can get to what you want, so that everyone else who are naysayers, including people who are probably close to you, can then actually turn around and talk about you in a light that they never did earlier. And that's what actually really happened to me, because I had a lot of naysayers around me. Everything was, this is really difficult. This was not. But then one thing that kind of kept me going was I always knew that I'm not talented, or rather, I believed that I'm not talented. I believed that I might not be the most talented person in the room, but I will be the most hardworking person in the room. And no one can take that away from me. So I would just work really, really hard. I would not go for the Goa trips with my friends during semester breaks. I would write plays during that time. I would not go to a freshers party or any party for that matter. Yes, yes, of course, a lot of people might say that, okay, but that's not a well-rounded person. But for me at that point, I just, I equated success with how you use your time.
True.
How you utilize your time. So I was always at it. And I think those 4 years and people saw that kind of passion. So when I actually transitioned from being a play theater director to being a film director, people who had known me during my play days and when I returned from the US and when I started making films, there were a lot of people who would come to my improv shows later and they'd be like, hey, you know what? I also saw your play like 10 years or 8 years ago. And then I was like, oh my God, is he the same Saad Khan who's doing the film? So for me, that journey, right, that brings a huge, that's a very huge morale boost for me, right? It really, and then because it's every time that when I was in college, everyone would be like, okay, this is not going to happen. You're sort of fighting against the tide. You're punching higher than, higher than your capacity and so on and so forth. So, but for me, I don't know. It was just I would really get kicked every time I would meet a naysayer. I would really internally smile.
I love the attitude that you had initially, right? I mean, and even today, I mean, because that kind of mindset and the attitude wherein you just don't give up irrespective of how many people are against your ideas, and you're like, no, I gotta prove them wrong because that's what I believe in, right?
But to be honest, Rishad, it was never about proving them wrong. To be honest with you, it was about proving myself right. it was never about other people. I never set out to do anything that I've done so far in my life to appease someone or to fight on someone else's idea. I just did it because I love doing this. I feel any person who ends up becoming successful in whatever area or avenue, for them they have to love that, right?
True.
When you see Elon Musk's interviews, and you can see that the man loves what he's doing.
Yeah.
And anyone. So I loved producing and directing and acting in plays. Whenever we've been doing improv now for 8 years. The show Improv, which I started about in 2012 now. It's it was initially not a rage, but now it is, and it's only because we've been persistent with it. We've been improving upon our craft, and with beautiful performers and artists like Danish, Saad, Darius, Cyrus, who've all graced the improv stage. Every show is different because we don't know what we're going to be doing because it's on the spot comedy. So before I enter a stage or before my name is called out, I still have that buzzing feeling, which I had when I first came out on stage when I was 17. So that has not changed in so many years, which is such a powerful emotion when you think about it.
Interesting. And there are few things that I'd also kind of point out what you said about initially, you being a little brash in your early days. Was there any specific event or story that kind of awoke you or, made you realize that, all right, maybe, I need to change my attitude so that I can go to the next level?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. In fact, when the moment I got my, master's, I got selected in a couple of universities, and luckily for me, I got a scholarship, to study, at a film school where I would get a 2-year film degree. And everyone was like, "Oh my God, from engineering, how are you going to do the shift to media?" Again, same naysayers. But my parents were very happy because I got a scholarship, right? And I was one of the very few lucky people to have gotten the scholarship because of the kind of work that I'd done over the period of my engineering college days. So when I ended up in my master's degree, I was so elated, and I was like, "Oh my God, look what I've achieved! Like I'm this jang, I'm this dude. I'm gonna now walk in." And then I ended up in a class of 20 students from different parts of the world, and I was the youngest. Maybe I was probably one of the youngest people in that group. And these were the students that were going to graduate after 2 years with masters in film direction, masters in cinematography, masters in screenwriting, and so on. And when they started talking about their film influences, my film influences were like Raja Babu and Coolie Number One, DDLJ, and Kuch Hota Hai. And these guys are talking about Godfather, Italian films, French films, Iranian films, and I've not watched most of these. So I felt like a fish out of water. All my attitude, my arrogance, all of that was reduced to a person with very less knowledge in that room. And that hit me really hard. And that was a beautiful awakening for me. And that's when I realized that, oh my God, I have 1 year now, because my second year is going to be mostly practical stuff. But my first year is going to be me also knowing all the movies that these guys already know. And they were like, if it was a marathon, these guys were halfway in. I hadn't even come to the marathon location. I was there. You know what I'm saying? I was far away from where they were, far away. So then I just took it upon myself. And then there was a time where for a year, I would watch 3 films every day, irrespective of the time. And I would sleep for 3 hours every day. I would do 19, 20-hour days. And in the 19, 20-hour days, other than my assignments, other than I was also teaching undergraduate students to get my assistantship so that my education was covered. So I was doing that in the day, doing my master's in the evening, watching 2, 3 films every night. And in 6 to 8 months, I started getting up to speed with the rest of my class. And that was a huge awakening. So after that, I made up my mind about one thing, that the idea of humility doesn't come from how much you achieve. The idea of humility comes from knowing that how much you achieve will never be enough.
Interesting. And then when you came back to Bangalore, how did you start? What was your first project, and what were the challenges that you faced while you were getting into this filmmaking industry as a whole?
Everyone was shocked when I was returning, because when you go to the US and when you're going to study your master's, the overall understanding is that you're not going to come back.
True. And
I also was not planning to come back. But again, a very interesting sort of boomerang came at me in the guise of recession at that time, when there were no jobs.
Hmm.
And I got a lot of jobs, but I got mostly unpaid internships in LA at different big entertainment companies, big Hollywood studios. But there was unpaid internships, and it's very difficult to survive. And quite frankly, I'm a very big foodie, so I was really missing Indian food like a lot. So these two reasons made me randomly, very randomly, book a ticket back to India. Like I wasn't even like my parents. My dad knew like 3 days before I was coming, and my mom didn't know, and my brother didn't know. So I surprised them by just packing up and leaving after 3 years of being in the US. So when I came here, but one thing I did was I knew that if I come here, I'm not going to stay in Bangalore for long. So while I was in the US itself, I already started talking to people in Bombay, had my savings, so got myself an apartment with two other people in Bombay because I knew that where I had to be in Bombay. So I came to Bangalore, and within a week after that, I went off to Bombay.
Hmm.
So I had this very bad habit of being this really a crazy fly. I can't stay in one place, and I have to keep sort of buzzing from one place to another. So I went off to Bombay and I started my career, and I went there, and I was very keen that if I have to get into the film industry, I need to assist some directors. Because there's a lot of learning and unlearning that happens in life, and the
True.
moment you put yourself towards unlearning, you will learn a lot more, and that's what I did. So I had done this whole US masters with a film director, core competence established, and directed a short film by then that had gone to Cannes Film Festival. So I had a good background, you know. So when I went to directors, I was very clear that I would want to work with only Ashutosh Gowarikar, Karan Johar, and Sanjay Leela Bhansali. So I only went to these three offices. And I went to these three offices, and within 3 days, I got a call from Mr. Gowarikar's office back. I went for the interview. He was a very respectful man, and he was very busy, but he gave me 45 minutes of his time. And then he hired me in his team as an assistant director. So that was my first brush with Bollywood. And I worked with him for about a year. And I worked with him on two unsuccessful projects. So I kind of learned what not to do. But he was a great mentor. I mean, he is a great mentor. I really learn a lot from him by being on set, because it's a very different ball game when you first do film school and then
True.
you come on the practical ground. The reality is very different. And that reality, I really I took a lot from that reality. I took a lot of how to communicate, what happens on set, and there also I stayed there for a year. And again, everyone expected me to be in Bombay for long. But then one thing I noticed in Bombay was that every second person was a director, every third person was a writer, every alternate person was an actor, aspiring
Correct.
actor, and I just realized that I'll get lost here. I kind of knew that I'm going to
Hmm.
get lost here. I was very sure that I'd become a smallest fish in a very big sea. So I
Hmm.
was like, let me try to see if I can become a shark in the lake. And that's when I came back to Bangalore.
Nice. And that's when your journey began, and then you grew to where you are
So I
today.
came to Bangalore because I asked one of the executive producers in Mr. Ashutosh Gwarikar's company as to which assistant director of Mr. Gwarikar has made a feature film.
Hmm.
And at that point of time, he said nobody yet. So then I said, okay, I'm going to be that guy. So I set out
Interesting.
then. I had a new goal in my mind. So I had a new ambition. I had a new. I always believe this, and this is for anyone who's listening, that if you want to do something, set your target, right? You set your target, but don't set a time to your target that I need to do this by 2025 or 2023 or what have you. You have a target and just go after it. Just go
Hmm.
after it like it's food. Like without it, you will not survive, and it will come to you. I just went after it with all my dedication and my hard work. Yes, obviously talent plays an important role as well, but then that talent, I always believe that it's something that you keep on learning till you die.
True.
So that is something that you keep on evolving yourself. So I just came and I came to Bangalore, and I started looking at all the independent films that were being made here, the short films. So I set out to write my first feature film script and to set out to find an independent producer to make a Hindi film from Bangalore, because that was something that had not
Yeah.
been done at all.
You spoke about a lot of people in Mumbai also, right? Any other person that you meet wants to be a director, wants to be an actor, model, and that's why people go there, right? A city of dreams, especially in India, if
Right.
you want to be an actor or get into that field. But what according
Right.
to you, Saad, because you're a director, what according to you are some things that people can do to get into this industry and make sure that they get their first chance or they are able to start their careers in this industry? What according to you? Let's talk about actors who wanna want to get into that industry? What can they do?
One of the things that bothers me about today's actors is that they will build their Instagram following. They will, do reels, they will do videos, they do dances. But the one thing that they're supposed to do, they don't do. They don't go and learn the craft. They don't put in the years to learn the craft. So, for example, I always recommend that go to the best drama institute, go to the best acting school, right? There is one in Pondicherry called Adi Shakti. Makes you lose a lot of confidence because they're so strict. And a lot of people are scared to go there. But I'm like, it's a challenge. Go and accept the challenge, take it. They will make you. They will first break you and then they will make you. Isn't that amazing?
True.
But and I think once you are put yourself into the mindset that you are going to be an actor by learning the craft and by always learning the craft persistently, no audition can stop you. No one can stop you. You are going to get there. That's exactly what happened to Rajkumar Rao, Nawazuddin Siddiqui, Vijay Sethupathi. There are many examples.
True.
You have to why would anyone cast an actor? They cast an actor if their audition is the best. That's
True.
primarily it. A lot of people say that name. Yeah, of course there are going to be, people who will go with recommendations and what have you. But if you are really talented and if you've learned the craft and if you go and you literally set the camera on fire with your performance in an audition, there is no way that a casting director or director won't notice you. There's no way.
Correct.
Instead of trying to do meetings and trying to do multiple photo shoots and show your body and show your jawline and all of that, I would recommend to all actors who are probably listening to first persistently learn about the craft.
Exactly. And I love the part wherein you directly hit the nail in the coffin, stating it's not about the other good to haves or other caveats that can come into picture, like building your Instagram or focusing on reels, rather than not focusing on what is really important. Because if you want to become an actor, why are you not working towards those? Why are you not becoming an expert?
Absolutely. You are, see, the following, the fame, it is a part. Fame is never the first product of a person's aspiration. Fame is a byproduct.
True.
Which means to say, you'll get fame if you are good at what you do and if people recognize that at all levels. If you're going to try and put this facade across that I want to do this because 10 of my friends think that I'm really good looking. Yeah, okay, great that you're good looking, but what about your performance? You might be great in front of the camera, but can you deliver the goods? Do you know what navrasas is or navrasas are? Do you know how do you take an emotion and how do you build a character? How do you show a character's journey? All of those things you'll only learn when you put yourself into the learning process.
True.
And I find it exceedingly, with more youngsters that I interact with, I find this exceedingly hard that there's a sense of entitlement that they need to work with a certain person. Say, for example, a lot of people reach out to work with me. And I only take those people who actually I know will not tell me that I can't work on Sundays or I'm after 7 p.m. I'm not available. But you are 22. your entire, if you want to start at 22, 23, number one, it's the most amazing thing that you're so lucky at that age that you can pursue this, because it'll be difficult for someone at 35 or 40 to pursue this, right? So you're 22, 23. Why are you putting a definitive amount of hours to the day that you can work if you want to be a film director? There are no hours. It's like Ronaldo can't be like, I'm going to just do practice for 1 hour and then I'm going to go and score 4 goals. It doesn't work like that.
True.
Right? If you want to be successful, you have to put in the time. Exactly. There's no other way.
And one of the things that I've also noticed a lot about is you, apart from wearing this hat of a filmmaker, you also do improv comedy show, right? You're also recently doing this fandom. Now, one of the things that is by research as well said again, over and over again, that people have this stage fear, which is even greater than the fear of death. You guys, or basically let's say you, are standing on stage and trying to make people laugh. That is even more difficult. Now, I want to bring that piece that you have at the moment, that talent or that hard work that you've put in, to be able to deliver that kind of content, make others laugh. How can people on the go, also, let's say if they are in some stressful situation, how can they make sure that they perform in those situations? what is your ritual? How do you put yourself in that position wherein you're not worried about others, but you're just focusing on the content or just delivering, and then be able to deliver and be at your peak performance state?
Great question, Rishad. See, primarily for me, improv as a concept is a concept that I think is not just good for comedy, but it's a way of life. A lot of
Exactly.
people follow improv as a way of life only primarily because it talks about giving and receiving. It talks about moment to moment
True.
spontaneity. It talks about listening, and it talks about making another person look good. So these are the four basic tenets of improv. And when you say making another person look good, if I'm doing a scene with Danish and Danish and I are making an improv scene on the spot, if it's not about making each other look good, then the audience is not going to laugh. Then they're going to see that the two actors are not in tune with each other. So if I give him an anchor in a scene and he does Nagaraj, and if I'm doing the journalist character, and if I throw him the right pieces for his comedy to hit home, then we both look good as a team.
True.
And for me, it's moment to moment spontaneity. So there have been times where I've had a very stressful day, and in the evening at 7 o'clock, I have to start a show where people, and I don't even know what I'm going to say because it's all about spontaneity. So my comedy comes from interacting with people. So if I ask someone a question, then I take that answer and then I start build from there, build from there, build from there. There's no real ritual. It's just that we've been doing it for so long now. I still get nervous sometimes, and I think it's great because if you're not nervous, then you end up getting complacent.
Yeah.
And the idea is one of the practices that I follow is that I'm invested in learning as my life goal. So I read a lot. I read a lot and I watch a lot of content. If you don't see me writing somewhere, then I'll be reading something. If you don't see me reading something, then I'm watching something. If you don't see me watching something, then I'm observing a group of people in a distance, not stalking them, just observing them.
Interesting.
But yeah, so I'm always, see, I believe this, Irshad, that we have this one life, right? And it's very precious and it's a gift, Many sperms try to get to that egg. You are that one sperm,
True.
right? So,
True.
and,
400
and
trillion
you
to
got,
one, right? What are the odds?
absolutely. What are the odds? And you got lucky. I believe this, and I've said this in many interviews already, but, at the cost of repeating myself, I'm going to say that we are lucky to be alive. We're lucky to have this opportunity of life, and we are lucky to be able to speak. Like I can wake up one morning and my throat might not work. Then what am I going to do?
True.
I can wake up one morning and my brain, some of my brain cells might become ineffective and inactive. Then what do I do? So I think all of these things make me really be thankful and grateful to what was happening, but at the same time, makes me aware that anything that we're doing, we might have this talent, but this talent has also been honed into a craft for many, many years. We've been doing it for so long.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's also about this never-ending, I would say, never-ending zeal to learn. That is something that I think I've said it. I always say it because I believe that a lot of people after they've achieved something, they stop learning.
Yeah.
They start using the same methodologies that worked in a very superstitious manner in their previous project. I believe in one more adage that you're as good as your last show. You're as good as your last film. So which means to say, I can't rest on my previous laurels. If I've made something and everyone has enjoyed it, now it's my duty, it's my responsibility as an artist to now come up with something better. Only then will the people also stay, right? Today audience has so much, right? They'd have the attention span of like a drunk fly. So they would want to watch a lot of stuff and
Yeah.
content that's fresh, that's unique. So we as artists, we owe to that audience who's following us.
Correct. From the conversation that we've been having, Saad, one thing that I've observed and noticed is the fact that you're not just worried about success. That's all secondary to you. But what you are really focusing on is how you can improve on a regular basis, how you can become a better version of yourself. And you touched upon a very important point, reading. I'm a big believer of that. I believe that if you're, because I'm a big reader for books. I read books all the time. That's where even I tap into my creativity. Do you read books? What do you read when you said, I like reading?
I read a lot, fiction and non-fiction,
Mhm.
and I read hardbound books. I mean, Kindle, yes, but I love feeling a book in my hand. I know it sounds wrong, but I love the fact that I can actually have a book and I can read. And
True,
I find it depressing when I step outside that I don't see a lot of people reading hardbound books anymore.
true, true.
Yeah, here and there, occasionally you find someone at the airport, and then you're like, oh shit, wow, that's so cool. And I've always wanted to have a conversation with that person, but then these days you can't talk to anyone because it just becomes creepy, right? Regulation of content. So
See.
I read a lot. I recently read this book, The Silent Patient. Right now
Hmm.
I'm reading A Lesser Coles When No One Is Watching.
Hmm.
So I read a lot of fiction. I also read a lot of short stories, essays, anything that makes me get more knowledge, because that's the whole thing, right? For improv comedians and for directors and writers, how are you going to present a new idea? How are you going to present a new concept? How are you going to improve your game? You only are
Hmm.
by having fresh information in your system.
True. I totally relate to your idea, Saad, about literally filling a book, because that's exactly how I like to read. If you notice, these are just a few books that I have, but I have a
Right.
pile load of books, and I don't understand the logic behind having a phone and then trying to read, or having a digital device, and because I don't get that feel that the I don't know if you realize this, but when you open the book, when it's a fresh new book that you've ordered and you smell that, I mean, that's a whole different smell of
Yeah.
orgasm.
Absolutely, yeah, and yeah, and I agree with you. I agree with you because it's and it also leaves a good imprint on on a person, right?
True.
Whenever you read something, you just always have some sort of a sensory memory attachment to it,
Correct.
and yeah, so that's one of the things that I consciously and constantly do. In fact, I spend a lot of my time in just thinking about stuff that I don't know. So I listen to interesting podcasts like Tell Me Something I Don't Know. If you
Hmm.
haven't heard that podcast, you can listen to it on Apple. It's a great podcast called "Tell Me Something I Don't Know,"
Hmm.
and it informs you, and at the same time, it's a very creative show, so it's also fun. And yeah, Vishal, for me, as I said, right, it's a constant art form. Whether it's being an entrepreneur, whether I run a writers' room in my team. I've got about 5, 6 writers who I work with on different projects, and they're all hired. They're not like freelancers, and I get to learn from them a lot. Some of them are young, some of them have had really interesting journalistic backgrounds. One or two of them are older to me, but they're all in my part of my writers' room, and we're all working on multiple projects, web series, and films. And it when we do these jam and brainstorming sessions, it just fills me up with a lot of happiness because when you bounce off ideas with another person who's creative, a lot of time what happens is you tend to be in that blocking phase. So
True.
I'm going to block because my idea is better. But what we do in first action is when we brainstorm, we make it a very open forum where no idea is dissed. Every idea is taken at face value, and then we discuss it very objectively, and then we come up with a solution where no one has felt that their idea was not welcome or that there, because sometimes even random bizarre ideas end up they lead to interesting ideas,
True.
and that is an open-minded approach that I always like, because I think that's how it's supposed to be. Even when we're making a film, even when we did Humble Politician Nagraj, when Danish and I would just as writers interact, and then he would go and act and I would direct, there was a certain sense of understanding between us, and that understanding comes from knowing the craft, and that understanding also comes from hearing each other out, where you're listening, and when you're saying, okay, yeah, this idea can work, or maybe this idea can't work because of this. But if you are gonna argue, your argument has to not be because you want to be right. Your argument has to be because it's valid, and
True.
because it's backed by a proper a proper reasoning, that reasoning that allows you to take a story forward or get to a solution.
Interesting. Yeah, it makes total sense as well about how rather than just thinking or getting our ego come in between, saying okay, what I'm saying is right and not what you are suggesting is not the right, but having an open mind to go ahead and even hear out, because that may lead to other possibilities, as you rightly pointed out. Uh, One thing I do want to cover, because I understand we are coming to the end of the conversation as well. There's one specific question I want to ask. Now, two basically. The first one being, the books that you've read, since you're a fanatic reader, I want to give my listeners back with your ideas or your suggestions. Let's say you want to recommend two books. One could be fictional and one non-fictional, with regards to how they can improve their life. It could be a self-help book that is close to you, or that you've loved so far. What two books would you recommend?
One is this is something that I read last year, which again brings me to the fact, brings me to the over encompassing thought that we are we are the product of what we consume in terms of
True.
knowledge,
True.
right? For me, Marshall Goldsmith's "What Got You Here Won't Get You There" is a book that I loved reading because it was also at a specific time in my life where sometimes you have this feeling that, Arey yaar, this is good, like I've done quite a bit, but then you're not done quite a bit. Like
Exactly.
sometimes obviously, you feel like you've scraped the surface. And that's when the passion comes to do other projects, to do different genres and to experiment and to explore. So definitely What Got You Here Won't Get You There is a book that I will highly recommend. Other than that, recently I read this book called The Silent Patient, which is a thriller, which is which I would say it's an original thriller. It's quite nice. It makes you it's a fiction novel, and it has interesting characters, and it really makes you think as well. So that's another book that I would recommend. The Silent Patient and What Got You Here Won't Get You There, and obviously that podcast which I already said, which is Tell Me
Yes.
Something I Don't Know.
I don't know. Yep. Perfect. And one last question, Saad, before I let you go. Now, for this, we'll have to imagine, right? Now, I know we have covered a lot today, but let's say 30, 40 years from now, right? You're able to achieve every single thing that you wanted to with regards to filmmaking, contribution, and helping the community also in a great way. All of that, every dream that you had, you've all made it come true. But now it's a time for you to say goodbye to this world. You're on a deathbed, and now you can only give two practical advice to your kids to live a happy and a successful life. What those two simple line of advice would be to your kids?
One would just definitely be persistent practice. I'm a very big on these two words, persistent practice, because no amount of it is going to go waste. And the second one would be slow when it comes to judging and trusting.
Interesting.
Because both of these are pretty much the primary causes of all the problems in the world. So don't judge too fast, and don't trust with all your might. Both might sort of come back and trouble you later. So even with trusting, right, what happens is when you begin to trust any person or plan or product, you tend to have a lot of expectations, and those expectations really take detour your process. So I think be slow when you're judging and trusting, and persistent practice. This is what I would want to say, and I hope that I have the at that point have the consciousness to be able to say that. if there is a place where someone's actually at my deathbed and be like, we need some golden advice from you, please don't die without. And I'm like, listen man, I don't want to speak, please leave me alone.
True. That's nice. I mean, I like the part. The second recommendation that you gave is be slow in terms of trusting people, because yes, you're right. Like if you blindly trust, it's definitely gonna bite you tomorrow. So being slow.
No, with trust, what happens is it's good to be trusting, and there's hope and optimism and all that. But what happens with trust is there's expectations, right? And because there are expectations, you're going to constantly be thinking about that than the work at hand. So when it comes to judging and trusting, I'm not saying don't judge. I mean, don't trust. I'm saying be slow when it comes to it.
Exactly.
Which means to say be mindful. Be mindful be mindful when you're judging someone or something, and be mindful when you're trusting something just completely without any research or without any prior information, because it really affects the way. And this is just so for the judging part is pretty much for everyone, personal and professional, but trusting is more for the professional aspect of it.
True. Oh, okay. Interesting.
Because there's a lot of times you do client deliverables, right? When you do client deliverables and whatever, like even as a director, you have a client deliverable to deliver a film.
Yep.
Whether it's an improv show, it's a deliverable. I'm delivering comedy. I've charged you've charged you money and you're coming, and my job is to make you laugh. And if I'm not able to do that, then I'm not delivering. So, and there, if the people that I'm working with, and if I've trusted them with things that have to be done, and they're not, and I've just left everything blindly to them, and I haven't followed up, and I haven't done my due diligence, everyone's going to not turn around to people who work with me. They're going to turn around to Saad. When a
Exactly.
film goes bad, nobody's going to turn around and say, "Hey, Cactus, call that assistant director." They will be call the director.
Correct.
So when I'm working with my assistant directors, I make sure that I'm accountable more than they are accountable.
So, Saad, thank you so much. I know we have come to the end of our discussion, but again, it was an honor to have you. I loved your honest and your really beautiful background that you've had in terms of how you've grown, how you've started to where you are today. I'm sure we're going to see more amazing stuff coming in from you. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rishad. It was lovely speaking with you.
This brings us to the end of this episode, and hope you at least had one takeaway from this interview. If you have any questions or want to talk to me personally, you can find me at www.silawatirshad.com. See you soon.